Hello world, this is Jeffrey, JGB146 Blake for Hoopa Hideout, coming to you today with a new deck profile over an emerging deck that's seen some success online, combining elements of older cards with brand new cards from Paradox Rift to make things happen. Now before we get into it, I do want to ask if you could just leave a like, a comment, and especially a subscription if you get anything out of this video, if you think the archetype, the deck list is interesting. And of course the full deck list will be in the description down below. Now with that, let's dig in. The main attacker in the deck is Entei V. Now it doesn't mean the deck is built around Entei exactly, but I will tell you, Entei V is integral to the deck. The fleet-footed ability, it's the same thing as what you've seen on Suicune V and Raikou V if you've played either of those archetypes in the past. It lets you draw a card anytime Entei is in the active. You can draw a card once per turn. The attack here is Burning Rondo. Your damage starts at a 20 base, and you then can increase it by 20 for each Pokemon on either player's bench. So you can get up to a total of 220 damage with the Burning Rondo attack, not counting any other modifiers or anything else that's going on. So that can be a good number. It's a little short of where we'd really like it to be though. However, the attack cost of 1 fire and 1 colorless energy is pretty great, and there are things that we can use that make that even better. We'll talk about here in a little bit. But first, addressing the fact that the 220 is not necessarily enough damage these days. Well, you can fix some of that. You can fix a lot of math with Iron Valiant EX. So Iron Valiant, it's a new card from Paradox Rift, and the key thing, in fact the only reason that we're playing it in this deck, is for the ability Tachyon Bits. Tachyon Bits says that once per turn, when this Pokemon moves from the bench into the active, you can put 2 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon. It doesn't matter whether their Pokemon that you want to target is in the active or on the bench, but the movement starting from your bench and going to the active does have to happen entirely during your turn. That means that if you promote Iron Valiant after something's knocked out, you don't get to spread the damage counters. But you play a lot of ways around moving things, so you get to use this ability plenty, trust me. And those 20 extra damage can go onto the active to help secure the numbers you need to get an exact knockout with Entei V, and they can also go to the bench and kind of do some snipe attacks. Helping out with that sniping is Medicham V. So Medicham's useful if you have something with 100 or less HP and you've done some Tachyon Bits throughout the turn, or maybe even throughout a couple of turns. Medicham has the Yoga Loop attack that lets you just send 2 damage counters to the Pokemon, and if it gets knocked out by the attack, you get to take an extra turn without your opponent doing anything. You draw your prize card, you immediately start your next turn, drawing again for turn, and then you can replay supporters, you can reuse abilities that you would use previously that turn. It's a very powerful effect. Now, supplementing our damage with Entei V and also giving us a 1 prize attacker is Radiant Charizard. Early in the game, it's a little hard to get the 5 energy, the 1 fire and 2 or 4 colorless energy cost for the attack. But where Radiant Charizard shines is of course in the late game, and the 250 damage that Radiant Charizard can bring is just very powerful, very useful in the game. There are times that it actually works out better to attack with Radiant Charizard than with Entei, just because of that. There are things you can knock out with Radiant Charizard that you never could get to with Entei. And then finally, our last Pokemon is Squawkabilly EX. Obviously, Squawkabilly just there to help you go through the deck on your first turn. Unless you have a great starting hand, there's a good chance that you're going to want to use Squawkabilly if you can. It's as simple as that. It isn't necessarily required for you to use Squawkabilly to get your first attack off quickly, but it's very helpful because getting an energy into the discard will pay off down the road to help you attack on the same turn that you're going. Now we have supporters to help all of this, of course. We have 4 copies of Professor's Research, and this will again just help you draw through your deck, discard cards that you maybe don't need right now or that you need to get into the discard for reasons that we'll get to. Hint, Magma Basin. Then we play 3 copies of Colress's Experiment. And this is just extra draw. You know, you're seeing 5 cards and picking the 3 that are the most useful. If there were another draw supporter that could show us the next 5 cards, we might play that instead, but as is, Pulverus is just one of the best ways to go through the deck. I'm going to play 1 copy of Boss's Orders. And of course, Boss's Orders just lets you gust up an opponent's Pokemon. Maybe you have enough Pokemon out that you can take a knockout on something on your opponent's bench, but not on the active. Well, that's where Boss's Orders would come into play. Now, helping you execute the Iron Valiant side of this plan. First, we have Battle VIP passes to get out Iron Valiants and any of the other Pokemon as needed on turn 1. Once you get Iron Valiant out, you'll need to do some switching. So we have 4 escape ropes to switch Iron Valiant into the active while forcing your opponent to change their active Pokemon. We also play 4 copies of Switch, in case what your opponent has active is pretty much what you want, or just to increase your ability to switch and activate Iron Valiant. We also play 4 copies of Switch Cart. Same use as Switch, but sometimes you'll want to save these because they do provide a little bit of healing that can be helpful. Now, on top of these cards, we do play 3 copies of Nest Ball, again helping to get more Pokemon out of the deck. We play 1 copy of Earthen Vessel so we can get basic fire energies out for Entei V or Radiant Charizard. And it's relevant that you get 2 because you can combine this with a discarding card, and that can really help you out to power something up with Magma Basin. We play a copy of Lost Vacuum to get rid of tools like Bravery Charm, something, you know, things that add so much HP that you're not going to get a knockout with Entei, or to help you get out of Path. Then we also play a Super Rod for recovery. And finally, our last item is a Techno Radar. It's sort of like a 5th Battle VIP pass, but you can play it on any turn. This can help you discard energies as well. And the effect, in case you're not familiar, lets you get 2 copies of Iron Valiant out of your deck. It's 2 future Pokemon. So that's really cool. You just discard 1 card to use it. Now, following that, we also play some tools to help us execute our plans. We play 2 copies of Future Booster Energy Capsule. These are basically there, in fact entirely there, to give Iron Valiant free retreat. The other effect that these cards have as a tool is to make Iron Valiant's attacks do 20 extra damage, but since we're not playing any Psychic Energy, that part is kind of not used. We also play 2 copies of Forest Seal Stone to attach to Medicham or any of the Enteis in order to search out exactly the card you need at that exact time to seal the deal on whatever part of the plan you're trying to execute. And I talked about it a little bit, but we're playing 4 copies of Magma Basin. So Magma Basin can, once per turn, attach a Fire Energy card from your discard onto one of your benched Fire Pokemon. So that means Radiant Charizard or the Enteis. When you do so, your Pokemon will take 20 damage, 2 damage counters. So it's not something that you want to overdo, and this ties in with part of the reasoning that we want to use Entei instead of the Raikous and the Suicunes, because there's not as flexible a card to accelerate to either of those types currently. You'd have to run more than the 4, it would be less reliable, and additionally, you'd have to find something else to do to bump Path. So this kind of serves as a dual purpose by accelerating energy and bumping Path to the peak to help you out. Now, rounding things out are our energy counts. So we have 6 copies of basic fire energy. Then we play 2 copies of double turbo energy. So double turbo can be used as a single attachment onto Medicham V to activate Yoga Loop as an attack, or it can be paired with, say, a Magma Basin attachment onto Radiant Charizard, so that you can immediately, from the get-go, have him with 1 fire and 2 colorless energies, so that you can basically hit for 230 against anything once one of your other Pokemon has been knocked out. And then finally, we also play 2 copies of Jet Energy. So Jet Energy is sort of like an additional switching card, so it adds to the 12 that we have here, plus the tools, giving us sort of 16 switch effects, but obviously the tool switch capabilities are able to be reused turn after turn, so it really is a build that lets Iron Valiant move around a lot. And that's exactly what you want to see to maximize the use of those damage counters to buff your damage. I've seen a few different builds, some I've been less impressed with. The major differences that I've seen between this and other builds, and things that I've talked about with Seagroves wanting to change, perhaps. We talked about it on our podcast recently. We're thinking, so Seagroves' build actually doesn't play the Super Rod, but he wants to go that direction. He plays 2 Techno Radar. I have not had an issue getting enough Iron Valiants out when I need them, so I like the recovery with Super Rod. It has brought me the win in some games that I would have lost otherwise. Additionally, finding room for at least 1 copy of Iono would be great. That's even better draw support in the early game than Colress provides, because you are shoveling your hand under the bottom of your deck and then getting 6 new cards instead of 5, and you get to keep all 6. And then finally, an additional jet or double turbo energy could help things out as well. And with that, I'll sign off. Thanks again for tuning in. We'll see you next time.